Gloria in excelsis Deo. Welcome.
Gloria in excelsis Deo. Welcome to the stream of truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shamebrook.
And I'm Sean Kelly.
And today we are talking about creating peace in important relationships.
Yeah.
And this was my choice of a topic for today because I have been experiencing what feels like a miracle to me. And of course, I love that word, but I don't feel I'm exaggerating. I mean, I think we all love to have miracles. And maybe sometimes I want a miracle to happen and I think it's a miracle, but this really does seem like a miracle to me. There have been some very, very, very challenging relationships in my life. I'm sure I'm not the only one out there who has experienced this. And in three of these most challenging relationships of my life, we have gone from very difficult, very traumatic to very loving, very peaceful. And I'm just kind of in shock and in awe about the transformation of these relationships. And to be honest, I don't totally understand what happened. And I love the quote that Sean taught me, the universe begins and ends in mystery. So it's not maybe important for me to totally understand how these relationships could have transformed so tremendously. But I have some inklings of what has helped them to transform. And one of the first things I just want to share is these relationships that I'm talking about that transformed, they didn't really transform through talking things out with the other person. It wasn't really, to me at least, a joint project where, okay, we're having trouble in our relationship, let's work it out. It wasn't like that. There was a lot of not talking and a lot of withdrawal many years in all of these relationships. There was a ton of inner work that I did around these relationships, and maybe these other folks were doing it too. I don't know for sure. I don't know. I just know what I was doing. And I have the sense that it's possible for one person to shift a relationship. That is my sense that is very, very possible. I'm not sure if that happened here or not, but I think it's absolutely possible. So I just also want to share that if you do have a relationship that is important to you, that feels very challenging or traumatic, I do think it's absolutely possible to shift that relationship completely with your own inner work and through spirit.
Yeah. Interesting. So you brought up a couple interesting things that I wanted to touch on. You mentioned that it was a miracle a couple of times, and that is what it is. That's exactly what it is, I think. One of the things we can get hung up on a little bit is trying to figure out what exactly we did to bring about this miracle. What did we do? Like, how did we make this occur? So that, especially in Tassel and I's case, so that we can teach it, right? How can we repeat this type of thing in any other situation, and how can we teach it to other people, I think is primarily where our head's at. But I just wanted to give some perspective on that, because we will never be able to grasp it fully enough to basically give a process or a repeating type of thing. All we'll be able to get is to these principles, which then supply a foundation for a miracle to be built, right? So all miracles, which would be healing, emerge from the creator. The person doesn't so much do anything. Like, so um, for example, so like for example, like a common misconception in our society is that we have a teacher and a student. The teacher teaches what their lesson plan is. The student absorbs the lesson plan of the teacher, right? But that's not actually what happens. What happens is the teacher knows something of themselves and expresses it. The student who's observing from a separate lens knows something of themselves through this reflection and learns something about themselves. They don't necessarily learn what the teacher intended them to learn. They learn entirely on their own accord. So the responsibility of the learner is specifically in the isolation of that other individual. And it's the same thing with healing. So basically when a teacher is offering a student truth and peace and that type of thing, it's the student's opportunity to grasp it. It's the student has to grasp it and to try to embody that higher order of truth. And the same thing's happening when healing. So when we are oriented towards forgiveness, peace, love, truth, and we keep showing up for that relationship, there you keep being offered opportunities to notice and to start to align to that. And basically, the creator is the one giving them the opportunities to find themselves and to know themselves. So essentially, the only repeatable place we can get to, because every contextual situation is so different, and there are people that will ignore those calls for peace and ignore those calls for truth, and there's nothing you can do about that. So in one sort of at the beginning of this video, I want to kind of dismiss the idea, first of all, that we can, at least this is my perspective, and if it doesn't resonate, that's okay, but it's our egoic self and our human self that believes that I can do stuff which will create change in the other. The creator changes in the other. Like the creator is what facilitates this expansion, not so much anything we're doing. We're instruments of that, you could say, like tools that might help that process. But in truth, we're not really doing anything. All we can really do is basically apply those basic principles of forgiveness, peace, trust, love to the relationship, acceptance, and non-judgment, and basically give them space to then see themselves and enhance or expand into a place that is more truthful to their being. But they might not, and so it's a tough place to be as I think a teacher wanting to talk about this, because on one level, I'd like to say yes, like absolutely, we have to don't give up on people, right? Don't give up on their divinity, and always giving them space and working for peace. But at the same time, we have to let go of the expectation as well that anything will change, because we just don't know it's up to them and us as well to co-create a harmonious relationship. And we can make
Yeah.
mistakes too in that we think are good, like especially when we start to establish boundaries. We can look back at those boundaries and realize that we didn't really need to do it that way. We probably could have done it a little bit more openly. I could have been less hurt by their words and then therefore navigated it more peacefully. So there's lots of improvement we can make too. So they're helping us in that way as well. So there's a whole bunch
Yeah.
of layers there.
I think it's just really interesting trying to talk about the human doing things and the spirit coming through you. And it's I don't quite know how to talk about it in a way. It's so
Confusing.
layered. But the way I see it is when I moved out of my egoic thinking mind that was much more caught up in being hurt and in boundaries and stories, and I dropped more into what I like to call my heart mind, which I really feel is just letting spirit flow through me. And then when I leaned into forgiveness and peace and love, unconditional acceptance towards these beautiful people in my life, then shifts seem to happen. So I'm saying that I did the inner work, but what I also mean is I allowed like spirit just to flow through me and be spirit basically. And then as you say, we don't know what will happen. And I'll just share, in one of these relationships, the most significant one, this process took decades. Decades. I'm not kidding. Like 50 years. Half a century. So I'm not, I don't want to be pessimistic. Like, oh, I don't think it has to take that long. But I also want to say that with this particular dear person in my life, I have seen many, many past lives with a lot of very difficult challenges. So I think for some of us in this lifetime, as we're in this ascension path, this is like this Mac Daddy of a lifetime to see if we can clear a lot of karmic relationships with a lot of different energy over many, many lifetimes. So as I say that, it's not surprising to me that it sort of took as long as it did.
Yeah.
Because I think we were clearing many, many lifetimes of stuff together. And so I guess what I want to say is, when I say I did the inner work, I don't know how to talk about it. I'm really just saying I let spirit guide me and flow through me. And then, yes, we don't know exactly what will happen on the other person's side. But what it feels like is we become this open vessel for a miracle to happen through us. That's what it feels like to me. And if I'm stuck in my stories and my thinking mind and my hurt and all that, it feels like the vessel is like blocked. Like the miracle, it's much harder for the miracle to flow through me.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's hard to talk about from the two different perspectives of the human
Yeah.
self and then the divine self. Um, the human's experience is a lower, I like to call it a lower order of truth. So because it is true that you did these things and saw a result, right? And so that's true. And we could say things like, I fell and broke my ankle last week, and that didn't happen to me. But if it did happen, that would be true. Um, so it's hard to talk about from both perspectives simultaneously. And then the next order of truth is that there's no one. This is an illusion, basically. So and that gets confusing too, because if it's an illusion, then what am I even doing and what's going on? So I think that we could look at it the most practical way that helps me anyways, I think, is what I try to do in this type of situation is sort of let their healing be theirs, but notice that if I hadn't healed in me, I wouldn't even be able to see them now how they are, right? Like, so I wouldn't even notice their expansions because I'd be holding on to old woundings. I'd be holding on to old pains and old upsets and being really upset with them all the time still, and expecting negative type behavior from them, which they would probably oblige me with. And
Yeah.
you know,
Another way to think of it, which helps me, is when I'm holding an energy of forgiveness, unconditional acceptance, unconditional love, I'm projecting that into my relationships, and I'm
yep,
going to see that reflected back. There's like a lot of different ways you can try to conceptualize it. And I think probably for me, at least, where I'm landing on this is it's not so important like how it happened. I can let that go.
yeah,
I'm not privy to that right now exactly. But I would like to share, and these are all really obvious things, what helped me reach. I think what I'm saying is I reached a place of peace in
yeah,
these relationships, and then peace came, and wasn't like I reached a place of peace and then the next day peace came. It, I did my part, I guess, and then eventually peace came. And it's only seeming to grow. The peace and love is only seeming to grow, I guess, as my peace and love is growing as well. So one of the biggest practices I just want to talk about is leaning in. I think there's a book by a really cool woman, maybe a businesswoman, called Lean In or something. I love this phrase. I love this idea. To me, this means, oh, there are some very uncomfortable feelings here. And my thinking mind might want to scurry away, like, oh God, no, I don't want to go there. It's so painful, it's uncomfortable. But I love this courage of, oh, and Sean and you and I talk about this a lot now, like there's a part of us that gets excited when something's uncomfortable because we know there's going to be so much juice there. There's going to be a huge expansion.
Depends on my mood, I guess. Sometimes I'm excited. Other times I'm like, ugh.
I know exactly. I agree. Yeah, sometimes I'm weary of all the expansions. But anyway, what I just want to say is, with this one particular person in my life who's very significant in my life, there were a lot of times where I cut off communication. I was not leaning in. And I think that was appropriate because I wasn't at a state where I could really handle it. It was very disruptive to my life. I just would feel so hurt. I wouldn't kind of know how to function. It would take me a long time to get over some of these interactions. And you and I have talked about this on the stream, that is an appropriate stage. Like whatever stage you're at is perfect. And we don't want to force ourselves to do anything. But I would say, as much as you can lean in, I would just encourage that. If you can lean in a little bit more than you did before, wow, then you're going to see something different. There's going to be a gift there. And I just want to, at this point, thank Sean, because with this particular person in my life, over the summer, there were some really difficult interactions for me through texting. And they would just kind of come out of nowhere. And they were really hard for me. And I was considering, oh my gosh, do I need to kind of like sort of take a break from communicating for a while? Because this is really hard. And I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but I would say you invited me, Sean, you invited me, and I see it as spirit, like coming through you. I see spirit was talking to me through you. You invited me. What would it be like to just continue as is and to receive these texts and basically hold them and be able to be love back no matter what is said?
I think I went the route of trying to notice the silliness of it all.
Okay.
I think if I remember, I think we were near the pool, right?
Yeah.
Talking and in the parking lot there.
Yes.
I think I was saying to try to go the silly route. Like, look how silly this all kind of is. Like, I think at that point in time, there had been some things that were brought up on text that, like, you didn't really even understand as far as what was going on. So, I had sort of said, like, clearly they're upset, right? And and there's on your side, there's obviously nothing even happening. And when people are upset, they can act viciously. They can act, they're in fear. They're scared of something. They want to fix something or put something into order. So they start to use shame or guilt or whatever to try and manipulate people. They try to put their fear onto others to get things to shift to whatever they feel will be correct, right? And it's all very silly and adorable, at least to me, like, because it's, I have trouble not seeing it to the degree where even very light comments by sort of the ego or whatever about others with me, I can be a little like, ugh, because it's very clear to me that they're just sort of, oh, they think they're in charge. They think they're in charge of the world. Oh, that's adorable, and it really is like that for me. And I used to think I was in charge of the world, so I get it, and that's why it's adorable, because I just see in them the confusion I used to hold, and that's what I try to do when somebody's being adversarial in any way. Also, you mentioned past lives and things. I just wanted to quickly say, you can pretty easily gauge where you're at with karma and what you're working through based on how many adversarial type relationships you have, or relationships that seem to go up and down, in any way at all, and basically, the more harmonious your existence is with these relationships, the more of that karma you're clearing to sort of prepare yourself. So, um, it's it's a great thing if you can basically look at your connections and go, yeah, I feel pretty much at peace with everyone. There are some things I still need to forgive, whatever it is. But if you're primarily noticing peace in your environment now, then it doesn't mean there aren't going to be new ones show up, but generally we're kind of at crunch time right now with the planetary shifts. We're kind of at a crunch time, so we're kind of trying to get as much lessons in right now as we can. Most of us, most souls will be calling in as much as they can for the next 100 years or so, maybe 150
Yeah,
years. So
I just want to share to that point. It's so interesting to me because my divorce custody situation, which was really intense and a bit crazy, there were so many people involved in it, and there was so much pain came up and betrayal, and for me, and I think I caused trouble too. Um, but there were like, I don't know, 15 people involved in that. And I've seen past lives with many of these people. And so this was like, in a way, this amazing experience for all of us to come together in this lifetime and see if we could clear some of the bad juju. And it took me years to clear some of that after what I felt when I had been betrayed or whatever. But I can really just see, as you said, it's this lifetime feels like a crunch time to just as many challenging relationships from the past as possible, bring them in now and see if you can forgive and
yeah,
get peace.
a lot of us are pretty much done with third density. A lot of us are done. So, like, we're already done. So
That's what it's
the
feeling like.
the karmic the karmic stuff that's coming, if you hold resentment to another in your heart still, let it go, or it's going to come back in some other form. Like, it's going to come back and another person's going to show up or do the same thing or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because
I can, oh, sorry.
our lesson is to forgive, basically, to forgive the other, because they're, you know, that's the lesson. And if we don't, so you can just assess your relationships with all the people that you are currently in relationships, all past relationships, anyone that's ever done or said anything to you that you've held onto, you have to let go of all of that, which requires contemplation and introspection. And if you do that, then you will not have disharmonious individuals enter your life. And if they do, you won't find it disharmonious. You will find it interesting, probably.
Yeah, I really like your word adorable. That has helped me. And what I also want to say, with this one particular person, uh, where I was having a hard time with how they were interacting with me, what I also realized, and I have talked about this before, is I was getting triggered. I was holding, or maybe I was projecting the energy and it was coming back to me, because some of the things this person would communicate to me there was a part of me that'd be like, oh, is she right? Is is what she's saying right? And I had to heal some stuff within me, some self-worth issues or trust of self. I would do certain things and this person would really criticize them or complain about them or almost shame me. Really, there was some shaming going on, or it felt like that to me. And I think that was a lot. I was holding that in myself. I had some, I mean, I'm not saying I'm clear of it. I think I'm still working through some of that stuff. But I guess I just want to say that when we're having a really hard interaction with someone and someone's really hurting us, well, why does it hurt? Why does it hurt? It hurts maybe partly because we in ourselves are holding some of that energy towards ourselves and we're just seeing it mirrored back to each other. So, in part, what helped me arrive at more peace with this person's communication towards me was just looking at how I was getting triggered and what that was showing me about myself and where I could really bring more acceptance to myself and trust to myself. That was a huge piece of it.
Yeah. You touched on a really important point. Um, so when basically if somebody if you know person A brings up, let's say I'm person A and I'm talking to person B, and person B says something that's judgmental. Really, there's only um, three ways it can go. Uh, the judgment will feel to me to be positive, and I'll say, "Oh, yay, that's great. They like me." Positive judgment. So right there, that's also a problem because now what I'm doing is I'm sourcing my value from their positive judgment of me. They've claimed me to be, I don't know, let's say they've claimed me to be nice or kind. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm kind. I agree with their claim of me. Now, what I've done is given them an authority over me, first of all. I've given them an authority over me, even by accepting their positive compliment in a way of it sourcing my value. Me agreeing with their positive compliment and then feeling like, oh, it's okay for me to feel like I'm a nice guy now because I have confirmation from this other. It's very normal. Everyone does this. I'm just trying to highlight the ego at work. And to talk about the mirroring that you were talking about. The next thing that they could say is they could say something that else to me, and I find that neutral, right? Like they say, "Oh, you're one of those Canadians, aren't you?" Like it's implying that I'm some type of way. I don't really know what it means, so it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm just like, yeah, I am. Like I'm not sure what that means, and so therefore it's just neutral. It doesn't mean anything. It's just they're just saying a thing. It's clearly judgmental. They're calling me a label, so therefore they are assessing me as something. Um, and then they could say you're stupid, and then I would say, ow, ow, that hurts. I must be stupid. They're saying I'm stupid, and I've given them authority or authorship over my being. My divinity is stepped aside in that moment, and my ego is sort of allowing their projection to come in and to be seen because part of me believes that I'm stupid. Like part of my ego believes that I'm stupid. Therefore, I see it and it hurts because there's that part that's inside of me that's wounded. And so whenever we're criticized in anything, we're only going to care and feel anything about the ones that matter, that we kind of agree with or have agreed with in the past at some point. We can only, this is really important, we can only see ourselves in others. So we can't, and what ends up happening is we start expanding ourselves into all that is. And so we start to be able to see ourselves more and more and more in others. So that's all we're ever doing here. And so when anyone is doing anything at all, we're seeing that aspect of ourselves play in front of us. So you could observe, your partner, maybe they do something and you're like, that seems like really narcissistic, that behavior. Like that, not that they're narcissists, right? We're not labeling them, but we're just saying that behavior seems really, really narcissistic. I'm observing it in my partner. It seems so selfish. And, because I'm seeing it from my lens. They didn't consider me in any way. They, whatever it is. Whatever makes it feel narcissistic. Usually it's something like they didn't consider at all. There doesn't seem to be any thought of me, or maybe any thought of others. There just was like, I feel like doing this, so then I go do it, and that can appear to be selfish. But the only reason that I'm seeing that as narcissistic is because if I were to do that in that way myself, I would feel that I am being selfish, because I also have the framing of Sean saying, like, I have both framings of it. Like, so I'm aware of the hurt that I would cause myself from it, and I'm aware of the hurt, and I'm aware of sort of the desire to just ignore all that and go forward anyway. So I'm aware of both sides inside of myself, which makes me more see like whatever story I want to see. And so when I see a sort of a narcissistic type of thing where somebody they're thinking of themselves in that moment, there's actually nothing wrong with doing that. And that's sort of how we're wired, we are wired to sort of consider ourselves often enough, right? Not all the time. And one of the ways that we graduate is we just consider others a little bit more than we consider ourselves, just a little bit, literally 1%. So, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's actually pretty hard to do. You have to rewire the ego to be more interested in serving others, and to rewire the ego into that is not easy to do unless you're letting go of a lot of aspects of the ego. And so whenever we're seeing anything in others, we're just seeing an aspect of us acting as an illusion, sort of. And now there is a being there, they're alive, and we love them, but at essence what's occurring is you're being shown a story of yourself, and that story can then be used. Like, I might want to, like, if I see this in Tassel or something, I'm like, you didn't think about me, right? And that's exactly what I don't want to do. What I want to do is let go of all of that stuff. Notice that I feel that I'm looking at this thing that makes me uncomfortable, and try to figure out why it makes me so uncomfortable. And most of the time, it will revolve around things that you hold dearly about yourself in some way, that you would like to be better at, or would like to be not so crappy at, like these ways that you've judged yourself. And so one of the ways that I've judged myself is I have this goal to be service oriented and thinking of others first. Always think of the other first. That's been my sort of attempt, is to reprogram that so that I can hit ascension or graduation into next density. Because I know that that's the only requirement. That's the only requirement. So all the rest of the stuff that I ever teach is just, whatever. All I have to do is think of others first. And not so that I can do something which brings me gain, right? I think of them first for their own gain. And that's all we have to do. And when I see that, so when I see something like that in others, that makes me, or something that I could appear selfish. First of all, I have no idea what's going on. That's the other thing. We don't know what they're doing or thinking about. We just see our own story of it in our mind's eye, sort of what they're doing. We don't really know. And so we can go in just knowing we don't really know what they're doing. If they're being outwardly dismissive and upset with us, we can let go of all of that, because obviously they're in some type of story. And then we can just offer love, and be grateful, actually, because they showed us where we were judging ourselves, and we can be happy for that. If they didn't do that, like, you know, there, for example,
Yeah.
like for me, there's a part of me that I sometimes don't like. I don't give my attention to myself in certain ways when I probably should, and this helps me see that type of thing too.
Yeah. I wanted to say that um, I think when someone criticizes us, or we think that's what's happening, that's what we're experiencing. Maybe they're not, but it lands that way for us. I think the real pain, we think it's what the other person did or said, but the real pain is within us. It's, oh, is that true? Am I like that? Am I not a good quote unquote person in this way? So I think the real pain is not so much what the other person did, although it's not necessarily easy, but the real pain to me is how it feels to oneself. The possible shame that you might arise, or embarrassment, or guilt, or I'm not enough. Look at how I fail in these ways. And that, I think that's what's so painful. So I think the process here, what this is teaching us is just more self-love. It's just, no matter what anyone says or doesn't say, how am I treating myself internally? Am I accepting myself? Am I loving myself? Am I giving myself a blanket of grace? I think all these interactions just keep inviting us to go back to ourselves and be our God self, our mother, our father to ourselves, and just like constantly shower ourselves in love. And then as we do that, our cup is very full. And I feel like that's how we're able to give love to others. But, we say this all the time, it has to start with yourself. But I have a question here, because you're talking about you need to be 51% service to others to go into the next stage. I am very hardwired to be service to others. And I think part of my expansion in this lifetime is to try to direct some of that to myself first. That's been my trajectory. It's very easy for me to just give everything away. And I love to do it. Like, my favorite thing is giving love. I love it. Okay, so my question is, I don't know quite how to articulate this. Maybe it's hard for me to discern my service to others. It also feels like service to myself because I love it so much. So I'm not sure it is purely service to others. Like, the way I would have to think about it is it only when it's painful for me to serve others that is actually service to others?
This is a great question. Thank you. It's a bit a little bit off topic, but it's a beautiful question and important. Um, so okay, there are two sort of layers of looking at service itself. Actually, probably three layers. Probably three layers, I would say. The first layer is the like egoic, like identity of what am I doing to serve? Am I serving myself? Am I serving others? How do I want to show up? Where it's like, and usually at this level, I want to create a church so that other people can find God, because I want them to find God, or I want them to, to feel what I've been feeling. There could be, or I want to teach this, and I'm going to sell this course to help others. Or I'm going to just go to Africa and do a humanitarian type effort of some type of thing. Or I'm just gonna take care of my children in a selfless way. There are so many layers of service to others in that area. But most of those things, like when we're approaching them from that lower perspective, we're actually, our intention isn't to serve others, it's to serve us. So when we're looking at our egoic calls to action, like they're always about us. It's never about other people. Even the idea of like, why do I want to set my intention to serve 51% of the time is for myself, right? Like these ideas are all driven for us to serve us first. So that becomes a like, well, then what the hell do I do?
I
If
know when you were saying that, because you were laying it out like I need to hit 51% so I can
I've
ascend.
already hit it, I'm good.
So, but I was just thinking, oh, but it's still like service to self because you want to hit the 51% so we ascend, you know?
That's it's one of the paradoxes of service.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, so what has to happen in order for service to be pure, and it need service to others, polarity to be pure, it doesn't have to be negative for you. What it has to be is selfless. So there's no consideration of outcome for self when the service is offered. So you have literally no goal at all. That's that's a polarized service offering. There's no goal at all. Love radiates blindly, freely for all to witness, all of the sonship to witness me. And as I'm witnessed, the light is seen, and that's it. That's that's the service. That's when the intention is pure. There is no such thing really as service to others or service to self. These two paths coalesce into a unified path, which is just service to all, or what I would just call as service to the creator. So you can do nothing but serve. Every act, every moment, every thought is an act of service of some kind, and there are varying polarities to the service. So if we're wanting to have positive polarization in our service offerings to others, if that's our goal, um, we want to stop engaging the ego at all, basically, and let divinity guide us to our service, and let it emerge from us naturally without a goal. Like we may feel
Yeah.
called to build a church. We may feel that, you know what, I'm building a church today and I'm going to go out and build it, and maybe people will come, or maybe I'll be by myself in my church. And
Yeah.
there's no reason or rational thought or linear oh, I'm going to do this and then this and then this. There's none of that stuff happens at all. And
Yeah.
the only way to do that is to kind of turn the volume down on the ego
Yeah.
so that you can hear the voice of the divine in you, or the inspiration, the creative inspiration principle that's within you, to emerge without the resistance of the ego going, oh, but if you do that, you won't have time for yourself. If you do that, then you won't have enough money for yourself. If you do that, then you won't have enough money for your children, or you won't have enough money for this other goal you have. Like even a goal to provide for your children is really just so you feel safe. There's the ego doesn't comprehend giving to others charitably, truly charitably. So it'll give to others in a charity so that it can say, look what I did, look how good I am, I'm such a good person. And so
Yeah.
we have to
The
let go of all of that.
mhm.
um but that's where the different layers come in. So the first layer is the egoic view of the positive and negative polarity, service to self or service to others, where the ego is trying to basically trick us into thinking we're serving others, but really we're just serving our ego. Then the next step is to notice, oh, okay, polarized true service to others is goalless. True service to self is order and manipulation and control. So there's regimentation and structure, and forming of like, I know how things should be and I'm going to put them into order, and calls itself to service. And then the next layer is that actually there's no real difference, in unity, uh, these principles coalesce into one, and it's just service to the creator.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's how I would teach it.
the um the way for me to feel it is I just envision kind of dropping down into my heart and just what would my heart do? I think that's a question from A Course in Miracles. What would you have me do today? And we can just feel that nudge, that guidance from spirit. What would you have me do? And yeah, sometimes the thinking mind is like, oh, but if I do that, as you said, will I have time? Will I have money? Whatever for my own life. But yeah, I think we can all feel that guidance from our higher self.
Yeah, and
And
I wanted to add one quick thing. Sorry, the ego. Actually, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll add it after. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
it's okay.
I get
And what I
excited.
want, I know, me too. And what I also wanted to say, the way I think about it, how I make sense of it is my heart does seem to have a goal of just wanting other people to feel loved and cared for. And I loved one of my particular niches is I love to help people connect with their dreams because that was something that I was unable to do for so many years. So that's like feels I just get so excited if I feel in some way maybe I another person is connecting with their dreams, for instance. So I think I do have that my heart does have goals, but they're not for my own self gain. And I guess that's the way I kind of see it. That I want the highest and best for my brothers and sisters. But I'm not necessarily gaining anything. It gives me great joy to see other people in peace and in their dreams and in their freedom. Um, and I think this is a really interesting point around parenting because uh, it can be confusing as a parent or as a child of a parent. Sometimes it can seem like the actions are selfless, but they're not, or vice versa. It can get very muddly. Um, and I think it's only from me becoming a parent that I got to a higher level of selflessness. I Yeah, and especially with a divorce situation where my human self, I want my kids. I want to spend time with my kids as much as I can. But that is not the highest and best situation for them. They need to spend time with their dad and in the rest of their lives too. So that's been a real expansion for me as a parent
Yeah.
to and it feels easy with your kids, maybe the easiest because you have like just so much love for them. It's maybe easiest to be selfless towards them. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I like to compare it because, like you say, it's tricky with children. Um, the ego manipulates us a lot, and it's very crafty and sneaky. Um, Before I talk about the children, I just wanted to mention you were talking about how like your heart just wants to help people and help people find their dreams and that type of thing. Um, yeah, so that what I would interpret that as is like the divine has a sort of thing that is wanting to come through you, right? The ego is what comes in after and claims it as mine, like the identity claims it as tassels, and then the ego then says, "Here is the way we go to do that. Here is the plan, and by doing this, we will be glorified. Like this will be our righteousness to give to the world. Like, and look how good we'll do." That's where the ego taints it, because the ego literally sort of positions itself as the divine. It positions itself as a sovereign God being, as God, and you can tell that it does this because it's constantly complaining about the creation. So the ego is never satisfied really with what is. It's always wanting other things to change. And so when the inspiration comes from the divine to bring peace or to bring empowerment or self-esteem or whatever to others, the ego then goes, oh, I'm doing this because I will have these benefits, and then others will actually be better people, and the world would be nicer for me. Like I'm trying to change the world, right? And so the ego sort of distorts the mission then into it's their own aggrandizement or compression, like, or constriction. It's one of the two with the ego. It's always one of the two. And so what we want to notice really is that there's a purity in that first inspiration to serve, and we don't have to do the rest of it. But the only way to stop the rest of the analysis and stuff is to sort of constantly realize that I don't need to think all this through. I just need to follow what I'm being called to look at and follow. And what ends up happening is it just becomes self-evident that that's the way to live. That's the way to live in harmony and in flow with the universe. And then with the children,
Can I just jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just off of what you just said, and then to talk about the children.
The children.
The children. You said something really profound. You said the inspiration will come in from the divine, and then the thinking mind, the human, will start with, oh, I should do that because to me, that maybe is a sign to me that, oh, my ego is getting involved now because I'm starting to think of why I should do this and why it would be beneficial maybe for me or the world or whatever. And what I hear you saying, and this is what I feel in my heart too, is just this orientation of not thinking, which is so funny to me because our whole lives we're taught to think and how to think and to be, be conservative and be cautious and plan and think. You got to think. Think before you act.
That's funny.
But so what I want to say is the more I am on my ascension path, the more I feel the invitation is, Tassel, stop thinking. And the more I stop thinking, I'm so much more at peace.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's really hard. Especially like I'm a single parent and money has to come through me to keep my life running. So it's hard for me, for my my thinking mind to shut off. But I just want to say that I've also realized my number one goal in my life is peace, internal peace. That's the Mac Daddy gift for me. I just want to be at peace.
Yeah.
So, and I find myself when I somewhat just get some distance from my thinking mind and just act from my heart, act from my guidance, that I do have peace. But I wobble in and out of fear around that.
Yeah. You said a lot of interesting stuff. So I wanted to just explain. So people think that they need to think to be more aware and intelligent in their happenings and daily musings and what they're doing, right? But just this will make it very simple. Thought is linear and limited in our thinking analytical mind. Thought is linear and limited. We can think step by step, but our heart space and our knowing is non-linear and infinite. So it's not attached to the personality. Therefore, it's tapped into the infinite mind of the creator.
Ooh, that's a great, I just want to pause I want you to continue, but that's just a great distinction. The thinking mind is just our human egoic mind. When we're
Yeah.
in the heart mind, we're in the infinite intelligence of the universe.
Yeah, that we're in the
Wouldn't we
divine mind.
want to
Yeah.
be in the infinite intelligence?
Right.
Yes.
Obviously, just if you just realize that that's true, and if you've had an experience of being in the flow state at all ever in your life, that is the nonlinear mind. That's the non-thinking mind. I'm acting without thinking. I'm doing as flows through me. That's why it's called the flow state, because I'm a part of the infinite mind of creation, not a part of the linear and dualistic mind of the ego. So it's obvious that it's better. Once you realize that, it's clearly better. But then we have a habit of lots of thought already. So especially those of us that were quite deep into it. And
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, especially this is what I have found. People who have a lot of formal education, myself included, I have a PhD, I have 2 master's degrees and an undergrad degree. The people I know who have a lot of formal education, it can be really hard to get out of your thinking mind.
yeah,
Because it has just been so activated for all those years in formal education. And what I also want to say about that is so many amazing entrepreneurs have not necessarily had a lot of formal education. And to me, that is interesting because they've been able to back away from the thinking mind a bit and be more in their inspiration, as I see it, as spirit just flowing through them,
yeah,
to bring through what really is their heart's passion.
yeah. These are. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
These are souls like that they come in knowing that the thought systems of humans are limited. Like they're aware of that. They can tell, so they don't participate as much. Like I didn't participate really. I didn't even finish college.
Especially for quote unquote professional folks, like so much of our ascension process is just unraveling this socialization to be up here in our thinking mind all the time.
Yeah.
It can be challenging.
There is a lot of like interesting things that can be done from that place, right? Like from science, technology places. Like these are the ego's attempts to make things, right? And anything that's ever made by the ego is made to try and circumvent or change the creation. So all sort of science and technology type things are kind of like the rational mind's exploration of itself, right? Like how much can the rational mind bring to improve life here, right? And what, but all of that stuff is sort of egoic in a way. And there's lots of really cool advancements and things that can happen there with technology and, floating stuff and, renewable energy and all these various things. So there's lots of really interesting things that can happen in thought. But if our goal is peace, then it's a different ball game.
Yeah, and what I would say, I don't know if you would see it this way too. I see that you just let the inspiration come and then you use your thinking mind to make it happen. You're going to use your thinking mind to make things happen, but you start with the inspiration, with spirit flowing through you, and then your mind gets on board to do stuff.
Yeah,
but you don't. I know, like, the way I lived was I was just constantly in my thinking mind, and I could feel the nudges, I could feel the intuition, but I had been so socialized to turn away from that and ignore it. So it's just like coming back to the inspiration and then let your thinking mind help you out to do stuff.
Yeah.
But you're living from the inspiration in spirit.
Yeah, the other thing to remember is that the ego will say anything that it can to take credit for whatever was inspired. So for example, let's say that I had this inspiration to create content that would help people feel empowered to pursue their dreams, right? And I felt that probably the best way, like, so first I get inspired to do it, then the ego starts to tell me the most effective ways that it knows of to do this thing, right? Here are the most effective ways. If I was more tuned into my heart, I'd probably feel directly just how to do it. There wouldn't be much of a need so much to think it out. Basically, I would feel called to do it, and then I would just know that the opportunity to do it will arise, will show itself to me, and I'll just go. I'll wait for that opportunity to do what I'm feeling called to do. If there's not something for me to do right now in this moment, I always recommend to try and take any inspired action immediately, because the inspiration falls away. But the ego will then, they'll make claims and they'll pick a way to do it. And the interesting thing is that depending on what it is, I think the ego actually often takes the route the heart was going to do anyway. But what it does is it uses its like intellect and its rationality to say, look what I chose. Look at the way I chose. The creator's sort of on the other side of that, being like, well, you went and did what I told you to do anyway, right? Like, you could tell yourself like whatever story you want about it.
In a way, the human just gets out of the way of
right.
The divine.
The ego puts a narrative onto it that says Sean is going to go do this thing, and that's what's happening here. But really what's happening is this instrumentation was inspired to elicit catalyst to the universe, and how it does that is sort of its free choice in a way, and then the ego pipes in with all the story about Sean wants to make the world a better place, Sean likes to help people with this, and Sean did this, and Sean's really cool, or Sean, you suck and you won't be able to do this, and you should just lay in bed for the rest of the day because you're garbage. So the ego will kind of go either way, and it's usually like the extremes too, like amazing or horrible. And it sort of makes this story around what divinity inspired you to do anyway, right? Like, you did it because divinity inspired you to do it, and then the ego says, I did that, but it didn't.
And then again, I get a little confused how to talk about this, because the way we're talking about it now, it's a little bit as if spirit is separate from us. Like, we are spirit. Spirit is us. It's one and the same. So right. I just want to, like, we are spirit. And what I also want to highlight here, and I always talk about this when I kind of talk to people about their dreams, the deepest heartfelt desires we have to bring through in this lifetime, I see they are spirit's dreams. They are spirit wanting to come through you in a particular way. And I know when I was growing up, my heartfelt dreams, they didn't seem so important to other people. And I felt like they weren't really supported, or they couldn't really happen because, they're just my silly little dreams. No one cares. Who cares? But the way I see it now is, oh my gosh, my heartfelt desires are God. That's God coming through me. That's what God wants. And I am God. So to me, it's so beautiful. To me, it means, of course, there's support for our dreams. That's God coming through you. And you are God. So your dreams are God's dreams. God's dreams are your dreams. It's one and the same. And of course, we can, the dreams can get a little bit muddied through the ego. And so I'm just really talking about those really pure dreams in your heart that you most likely have felt inklings of like your whole life. They're very precious, very, very precious to you. Those dreams I see as God's dreams.
Yeah.
Which are your dreams.
Yeah, that's totally right. So when we say we are spirit, and you had mentioned that it gets a little confusing, we're talking about it like, so we are spirit. but the ego is not. So
Okay, so but how can anything not be spirit?
so the way that I would frame this, so ego, everything is the creator, right? The
Yeah.
creator is in everything. So it the creator gave, the way I see it is the creator gave us the capacity to develop our own mind, right? What we ended up doing as a collective and society for many, many, many reasons, and a lot of it is pretty dark stuff. So I won't get into all that. But what ended up happening is instead of the pristine mind that we were blessed with, that was in union. So this would be in the Bible. They would call this Garden of Eden, and Adam and Eve. Basically, the pristine before the fallen angels or the separation. There was no ego, right? So the ego is made by the person in order to separate from divinity itself. So because the person made it, the person, um, the ego loves itself, obviously, because it made itself. But the creator is of the higher order, and so the ego is limited. It can't. The only thing that it can't control, sort of in the mind, is what the creator brings in. So it has to distort everything and has to make it all wacky. Um, so
This
it's
would be a sorry.
no, that's okay. So
I was
it's
gonna say this would be another really just good topic. Like, what is the ego?
yeah.
I
So
think there's a lot here.
it's not, the ego is a tool when an entity becomes separated from the divinity within. The ego is the tool to remember itself in many ways. So the ego, the concept of the ego and the capacity for the being to create it itself is of the creator's will to do that, because it will be what draws it back. The ego can never be satiated. It will actually kill itself in order to be right. And that's where suicide comes from. So if we think about any type of suicide, or loss of life that way, the ego has gotten so much control that it has said it will be better if I terminate my life, because it believes that it can control that, and it can't. So when the person passes, they realize that, oh, I'm still here, and they continue. So that's one of the true sort of like, the soul will never forget that moment when the ego thought it could control life itself, and then couldn't, and the life is eternal beyond that soul's attempt to leave. So the most important thing is I think just to recognize that although the creator more appropriately sort of has open allowance for you to do whatever you want. So the ego was formed from this. It's really programming. Like we weren't meant to be this way, really. It kind of went all awry, all astray, and that's where all that sin came in and all that stuff. So it went astray, and that we create this false self, this false identity, and we have no we create it with such sort of momentum and power that it kind of owns itself. It starts to become its own sentient type of consciousness in us and controls us in
It's
a way.
really it's really interesting because I think as a parent, you can actually see when the ego starts to really kick in your
Yep,
children.
totally.
And it I don't know, for me, when I view my kids, I would say it was around like 7 or 8 years old, where maybe before that time, there was just such a purity of their being. Like just they were divinely inspired constantly. They just would be in the moment, be present, and and act from inspiration. And then at some point, it seems around 7 or 8 or so, the the socialized, in my case, your case, Western ego has had enough time to sort of develop and start to take control. And I think this is part of the reason that often we really appreciate little children
Yeah.
because they're more egoless, and we
Yeah.
can just feel the divine purity
Yep.
flowing through them.
Exactly. And that's why children, that they'll be more drawn to adults that are like also of that like vibration, that are
Of
closer
let
to that. So
Yes,
like
and
that you can think of that I'm kind of like the dad who like plays a lot and is like always happy pretty much to see the kids, and tries to be at least, and is you
yes,
know uh sort of their buddy, right? They tend to
you're more
be.
on their vibration.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
not an authority really so much in my household.
yes,
I'm more like a
yeah.
buddy. And I prefer it that way. And if I need to take authority in some way, then I step in and do that. But primarily I'm just a buddy that's there with them. That's how I sort of see it.
Yeah. And it just seems like sort of one simple way to conceptualize the ascension path is simply to like go back to your inner child,
Yeah,
just to become childlike again in your trust, your faith, and how you live from your inspiration rather than the thinking mind's agenda.
exactly. Exactly. And one last thing I just wanted to say about the ego is it's created by us in separation because we wanted to explore separation. So we have to realize and take responsibility for it, despite there's a lot of different narratives we can follow to figure out, well, what happened. And we were manipulated, but as souls we chose to explore separation for the creator, in service to the creator. That's the way to look at why it's here, and to be sort of okay with, yeah, I mean, I chose it. But what we're trying to do is basically, and this is one of the reasons I think that so many wanderers came here, is literally just to help dissolve the ego. Like, help dissolve. And that's why I tend to call the ego. It's not that we don't truly have so much our own individual ego that is Sean. Like, it's not an entity of itself. It's a collective ego that is there. It's and we tune into it and then call ourselves an identity and stuff. But it's all not really real. And we can oh, I thought I saw a fox. That was weird. We had a glitch in the matrix just now. There was it's not that there's like necessarily a separate self or anything like that. It's sort of the ego. That's why we don't refer to it as like my ego or others' ego so much. It's the ego. And I think that's why people came here, is basically to help get rid of that, because getting rid of the ego is what will enable the divine inspiration to not only show up, but then be expressed in a more pure way, which will lead to just peace, basically.
Yeah, I'll just say one last quick thing. We can see the ego in different cultures, um, amongst the people of those cultures. So, like I would say, Eastern culture has a specific collective ego, and Western culture as well. And then also, are we trying to get rid of the ego, or is it a little more nuanced? We're trying to, in a way, I know we've talked about like see the ego as your child in a way, like it's going to be there, but we can turn down the volume of it and
I
sort of like take care of it and love it too, but just we don't let it control what we do.
I think there are varying stages to it,
Hmm.
and so I can only speak really to where I've seen so far. Um, and I can try to do that. So each person will be called to like go to a
Yeah,
different place with this.
right.
So there's a place where we realize just, oh my gosh, almost everything I do is egoic. Like
Yeah,
I didn't consider myself to have a strong ego, or I didn't consider that I was egoically motivated, but I'm realizing I am. And everyone is. So it's just a matter of time for them to realize that and then start to really look at, oh, my motivations aren't as pure as I pretend they are. They're not. They're more
yeah,
about me than they are about others, if I'm honest. So we have to notice that first. And once we notice that, then it just becomes a decision. It's going to be really uncomfortable for us because we've seen that in ourselves. For us to continue selfish behavior, it's going to feel, we're going to notice, we're going to feel guilty. Our conscience is going to say, but you know better than that. Like, so why are you doing it still? You know better. Um, and that will build guilt because the ego will still in power is going to guilt shame us. So to escape that prison of suffering, we will want to basically form an ego that is more comfortable for us. So an ego that is more aligned with truth, but is still kind of running the ship, so to speak. But it's going to be more harmonious. It's going to be more aligned. We might be doing more like our work's probably about serving others some way. We're reminding ourselves that fear isn't real. We're trying to put faith. We're trying to restore faith in divinity instead of having faith in the limited person here. We're basically trying to construct an ego that is more humble and more based in peace. And we're doing that because we're sort of we're preparing the personality to dissolve entirely eventually. But that doesn't have to happen in this lifetime. It doesn't have to, it will happen, but it doesn't have to happen right away. Um, and it's not even that it dissolves and you lose it. What happens is it dissolves in sort of the light of truth. Like you see it for what it truly is. And then it becomes a sort of, I've mentioned this before, it's a garment. Like you realize that you put the ego on to go be with other egos. Like it, unless I want to be giving a sermon in all moments of the day, channeling the Christ and walking around doing that all day, which I can do. People, I don't, I don't want to do that right now. Like I'm not really ready to do that. So, and I could do that. I could discard the ego and then do that. But there's more. I think I said in another stream, there's more for me to get here in separation. So you play in the ego, you pretend to be separate people, but you're pretending. And that's where it starts to become, their pressure starts to build from the divine self to say, when are you going to let go of this too? Like, when are you going to let go of that as well? Because you can see that you don't really need it quite how it is. So you get to varying stages and, you know, so the ego doesn't necessarily die. I would say the ego becomes reborn into a divinely aligned ego in a way, but it is still ego and confused. So it then has more learning to do to realize that it's actually not real at all, and that it's no different than like today I choose to put this sweater on, tomorrow I put a different sweater on, or if I'm Jim Carrey, today I'm being the man on the moon, Andy, what's his name? Andy Kaufman. And then the next day I'm being Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. That's all you're doing. You're an actor. You are being whatever personality you choose to be, and that's what the ego is a carefully constructed, detailed personality that we've made over decades of time for ourselves. and in the collective. And so even when we've cleaned it all up and made it quite nice, a nice place to live, it's still not a real place to live. And so it just becomes progressively more self-evident to us that spirit, God, the divine beckons us. I've started to feel like calling them the supreme, because the words divine and things don't seem to, it's almost like they're overused nowadays, or I've overused them or something. But the supreme one calls, and it's gentle, but it is obvious that, like, when I'm being Sean, there's a part of me that's like not quite happy with that. There's a part of me, it's not loud, it's just a part of me that goes, that's sort of aware, this is not real, what you're doing here. Like, what your Sean identity is experiencing here is not entirely real. And so the invitation then becomes to accept that and to enjoy that, basically. And then so you have a peace with that yeah, I'm playing a role as Sean. I'm okay, and I'm having good times and doing things with people. I'm aware that it's an illusion, and it's fine. Eventually that will again start to shift, and there'll be an impetus to discard parts of Sean, or just let go of all of it. And then in that way, that's more the Christ state, where you're sort of, you've dissolved the personality into yourself enough that there's not even a calling to try to put it on. I wouldn't even, maybe I wouldn't even hear my name properly. Like if somebody says, "Hey Sean," I may not hear them, type thing. Like it's that much gone. So so yeah, there are stages. I don't think the ego as a tool, in third density anyway, like, goes away. Or the thinking mind, it doesn't go away. But I think the thinking mind, the rational mind, is an excellent servant and a horrible master. And so really what we want to do is learn how to help our mind be our tool and our servant, instead of being driven with our identification with our mind, which is identification with our thoughts and our feelings as being always 100% true and who we are. And we can learn to let go of it at whatever rate we want, and it's okay. But the more of it we let go of, the more happy we will be with what is. So it becomes a very self-regulating process. It's very, very it becomes very obvious about the divine perfection, because you can't release the stuff you're not ready to release. You can't bring it back after you've released it. Like, you can try, but it doesn't hold because you've seen through it already. Like, you can tell that there's nowhere to go but forward in expansion, and there's no way to rush it or to do anything. It's just, it happens sort of naturally, and you'll feel where you're supposed to be, I think. But most common misconception and fear about it is that if I let go of the ego, then who will I be? Like, where do I go? And the ego tells us that if I let go of me, then I'm dead, basically. Then there's no more me here experiencing. And it's kind of the direct opposite of that. It's the limitations on what you are lifted. And so you're just more than you were, basically. And it just takes some bravery and courage, I would say, to do it a bit, and then it becomes obvious. It just becomes obvious that every time I let go of one of these egoic weird things I have, life's so much easier. I just let go of it. I don't need it. I don't need the nonsense. And so you can hold on to the parts of the ego that feel good for now, but those two are not real. And so but wherever anyone's at's perfect. So there's a whole long like pathway of it, and it's complicated, and I can only speak to the part I've got to where I see the identity as a costume, sort of, and I willingly wear it and play in the theater, I guess, is sort of the way that I look at the world right now. Yeah, yeah. That was an excellent talk. You had some great points and questions as well. Is there anything that you wanted to say before we end it? We kind of went from like forgiveness and peace into this ascension and ego stuff. I'm okay with it, but it was an interesting change.
I think what's interesting is it's through the process of like getting out of the thinking mind and into the heart mind to make peace with others. That's a great vehicle for this larger process that we're doing of sort of releasing the thinking mind and being in our heart mind and just coming back to who we really are. So I think it's just a pathway.
Yes.
It's a pathway.
Yeah, it's the ego that feels threatened by the other person, right? It's the ego that feels like they've done something wrong, and that whatever it all is, it's the ego doing all of that. So releasing that is a huge step towards having peace with them, which will be forgiveness, right? You'll forgive them because the ego's not
the divine union path is the same path. It seems like there's a lot of pathways to do this through relationship, to let go of the ego. So I think it's really helpful.
The further you get along with it, the more sensitive you get too, it seems. Like the more sensitive you get to witnessing other egos, and you start to be more judgmental usually at first.
Yeah, right.
Like, because
you're just discerning
you're
happening.
Yeah, you're starting to be like, it becomes very clear what's happening. So like, for example, I think one of the things, just because you mentioned the divine union, like one of the ways that this happened is like when we were talking on the stream the other day about how you sort of had an issue with some of the stuff, and then you brought up some of the negatives about it, and I felt like, and I said felt like I was trying to be convinced of stuff. Like that type of thing is like, I can see the ego trying to manipulate stuff to make it right. Like it's not right how it is. It's bleh. So I'm gonna say what I need to say to make it right. And I can see all that, and that gets really, really, really uncomfortable for me, because I see that as just silliness, sort of. Like, not that you're being silly or whatever, just the ego is being silly here, like thinking it can like control everything. And not that you were trying to control it. I'm trying to be very careful with my words. But those types of moments, and then I can see myself get triggered by it. And so now my ego starts, or the ego starts kicking in, like, oh, I've got to defend myself. And the whole thing, and I'm like, whoa, this is all nonsense. It's all nonsense. And so I get frustrated by the nonsense. What I see as nonsense, which is just the feelings are real. The cases are real. Judge Judy. But it's just a bunch of judgment getting slung around, basically. And it becomes really obvious that's what's happening. And most people are not aware they're doing it while they're doing it. And it becomes very challenging as the receiver of it to even say anything about it, because it is judgmental of us to speak against it. And then it's also not going to feel good in any situation. So basically, we like, in order for any of that to heal, I have to like be okay when I see ego flare up in any situation, in myself or in others. Like when it flares up to try and set its way, I don't have to take it as personally as I do. And that's really where I was able to learn how to expand, like that it doesn't, it's okay. It's okay. Basically, if the ego is freaking out, and if my ego starts to freak out, it's all good. It doesn't matter, basically. But in order for me to get there, we have to experience that type of sensitivity and that type of thing. And I think even today, if I were to say, like, if I said, like even as I'm talking about it today, I sense that there's this sort of like around the whole experience, like some of the things that I said about it. And like I'm sort of learning that I have to be okay with whatever it is, that I'm meant to just say whatever I say, and it's fine. And people, you know, I accept even unacceptance is is basically the way I've tried to learn how to let go of my ego enough that I can accept when I'm not accepted, is sort of where I've been able to get to fairly well now. But we'll see what else there is to expand in. I'm sure there's a lot more. So
I wanted to just say one last thing. I love this sort of orbit. Like over here, we're still with source. And then we kind of go out away from source in our individual vessels with our egos. And then like kind of over here is a point where maybe we're most in our ego. And this can happen over, hundreds of lifetimes. And then the pathway back to source is just, letting go of the ego. So it's just a beautiful,
it's a great way to describe it,
adventure that we're all on. Like we're with source, we come out here,
and it is
really separate, and then we come back.
It is also a gravitational pull. It is a law, like a natural law of the universe. It's a type of gravity. It could be called a spiritual gravity. It's the same expression of gravity that we see on Earth with the sublogoi, or humans that roam around on Earth, tethered to Earth from gravity. Gravity is sort of the love drawing into the creator, and that's what happens. And so it's exactly that. You don't have to, like, if you were jumping out of a plane to come back to the Earth, you don't have to try. You're gonna make it to the Earth. And all you really need to do is jump out of the plane. Just let go, right? And then you are gonna make it. So yeah, that's a great way of putting it. That you're like in orbit, and you kind of drift away, separate away, and then get pulled back in. That's pretty much exactly how I would see it as well. And that it is a gravity. It's like it's a force. It's not like you can go, oh, not right now. Like you'll just go at the speed that is whatever your speed is. Like that's, and it can speed up and slow down and whatever. But yeah, that's perfect. I think that's probably
Excellent.
time for us to end.
Yeah, that was a long one. Thank you so much for joining us. And if this video resonated with you, we so appreciate any likes, comments, subscribing to the channel. And we have a great Patreon community. That's
and
also
we have our course
on Thursday. Course. Oh yeah, and our course.
So some of the stuff we're talking about here, if you're interested, we have a course called the Namaste Method. I think there's a link below in the description. If not, I'll make sure there is. And you can use this actually to sort of employ some of the principles and things that we've been talking about around forgiveness and peace and all of that with anyone else. You don't actually need to have them participate in the method with you for your side of it to work, which is part of what we were trying to illustrate here today, is that Tassel didn't so much talk with people to resolve these things. It was more just about feeling her things and forgiveness and stuff like that. And then there's sort of levels of it as it clears up, and then you might have periods of a year or two where it's really nice, and then something happens again. You have a recurrence, and it just means there's more opportunity to look at some stuff and clear that too. So, but you could use that course if you're interested. It's I think it's $27, and it's linked down below. And yeah, I think that's everything. And so we'll see you guys on Wednesday, and then Thursday. You were just about to say something about Thursday. We're doing a thing.
It's the Metaphysical Monthly.
Oh, it's my thing. Right? Well, it's our
thing,
but it's this one's like something that I kind of spearhead, I guess.
It's your brainchild, yes. So that's
excellent.
Thursday at 8:00 Eastern on Zoom, and we should maybe put, I don't know, a link to it or something.
Yes, we should do that. We should do something.
And we also might as well just say we have a really great Facebook group called The Doctor and the Wizard, where we have a lot of people coming in and just community, and then we post the events coming up too. So if maybe we could put a link for that as well.
Yeah, we can do that too. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Awesome.
Maybe remind me when we're done.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Alrighty.
Thanks, everyone.
So much love to everybody.
Take care.
Bye.